use cases of Web3 through DePIN.
This episode is brought to you by StoreX, the DePIN leader in decentralized cloud storage, where your data lives across a network and not in big tech silos. Hello everyone, Daniel from DePIN Hub over here. Today we're interviewing Alec, COO of Spexi, a company crowdsourcing ultra-high resolution drone imagery through a decentralized network of everyday drone pilots to build the freshest, most detailed map of Earth. It's good to finally have you here on the podcast. After so many panels together in Dubai during Tokyo 2049, now the world can know more about Spexi, a super interesting project that's building on the DePIN ecosystem, and I'm very excited to get everyone to know more.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having us on. And we love Hotspotty and the DePIN Hub and all the things that you're doing to help bring people together in this space. And I think you're connecting the dots with some really quality projects out there that we like to be associated with. So thanks for having us. My name's Alec. I'm the COO at Spexi Geospatial. We are the founding core contributor to LayerDrone, which is the fully decentralized drone imaging network that is now the largest in the world. We've just passed 3 million acres of area imaged in ultra high resolution, fully standardized drone imagery using off-the-shelf drones, which has just never been done before. And it produces imagery that is far better than satellites and significantly better than what planes can produce, which provides customers with a totally different set of use cases for how they can use Earth imagery to better power their applications, make better decisions, fuel different use cases that just really weren't possible before because the imagery wasn't good enough. And so we've been building in this space since about 2022 when we raised early 2022 when we raised our seed round, and it was called Spexagon then. And we've shifted back to Spexi, and then we've announced the LayerDrone network and foundation. The Spexagon still exists. It's the atomic unit of the network. We call the Uber H3 resolution 9 hexes on our network. We call them Spexagons instead of hexagons. So it all kind of comes together. But basically, drone pilots can download our mobile application and then connect their off-the-shelf sub 250 gram drone. And then all they have to do is follow some very simple onboarding steps, and then they can go start imaging on the network. There's really not much effort required to get things going. You don't have to install something on your roof. You don't have to sort of, figure out how to wire in a router or something. It's really as simple as an off-the-shelf DJI drone. Right now we're working with the DJI Mini 2, Mini 3, Mini 3 Pro, and Mini 4 Pro models, with more models coming online soon from other companies as well in the not too distant future. And you can start imaging fully autonomously the hexes in your neighborhood. Now, that's not to say that there's hexes everywhere. There aren't. They're in specific cities and specific places for good reason, because we can't sell data everywhere all at once. And so we're doing our best to grow the network in a more sustainable way such that we can monetize the data that's being captured. I think one of the things that we're trying to do as best we can is not have too much waste on the network. So what that means is when we start incentivizing the network with token, which the LayerDrone Foundation will announce in the not too distant future, we want to basically have the least amount of token go out for data that can't or won't be monetized. We want to have the tokens incentivizing data capture in places that will have monetization in the near future. And I think that's one thing that DePIN hasn't done very well in the past is the networks have paid for data in places that they haven't or can't or will not sell the data. And this is really wasteful and expensive. And stakeholders in the network, I think, want to see a more efficient use of resources. And that's what we're going to really be pushing for here. Not to say that there's not places where that will happen and that there's not some strategies for growing DePINs that make sense. But for us, it really makes sense to try to stay as focused as we can in places we can monetize. So our customers range from the largest spatial AI companies and geospatial companies that are using AR, VR games for mapping and different kinds of mobile-based data collection, all the way down to the cities that we operate in actually also buy the data for their own use cases, like making sure that permits that are being requested are in fact legitimate and the buildings and things that are stated in their applications are in fact there. Insurance companies, construction companies, development companies, these are all part of our addressable market that we're going after. So all of that to say, we are now, I think, forming what will be one of the bigger forces in geospatial, and it's a really exciting time for Spexi and LayerDrone.
Oh, amazing! Thanks so much for this massive introduction of the project. One question that I have, like, how does this idea got started? Because we talked to so many founders, people trying to do so many different ways. How does this project came to be? I think that's something that I find super interesting. To the point that, okay, now we're gonna there's the idea of DePIN. We're gonna incentivize people with tokens. How does this happen?
So Spexi Geospatial, the Labs Co., was actually founded in 2017 by our CEO, Bill. And he was focused at that time on flying cities with aircraft. So his previous 20 years of work was overflying cities with high-resolution cameras using planes and selling that data back to governments and tech companies like Google. And in fact, most people don't realize, but when you open up Google Maps and you look at your city, if you live in a fairly modern city like Lisbon or Vancouver or Toronto or New York or Chicago or LA, what you're looking at likely is imagery from planes, not satellites, because the plane layer is that much better than satellites. And so most cities now have invested in that imagery infrastructure, not only to enable their city operations to make better decisions about what's going on, but also to provide that data to the mapping companies so that people can get a better view of their cities. And so this is a big part of what our history is steeped in. But Bill realized that drones were coming up fast and that they were likely to start eating away at his own business. And so he decided to start trying to figure out how to build software to network drones to be able to basically put himself out of business. And where I come into the mix is around that time, I was flying helicopters for a living all over Western Canada and North America, fighting fires, flying miners around, tourists, you name it. I was doing it in a helicopter. And I got the opportunity to start a drone regulation training and technology company because I knew that there were new drone regulations coming out in North America. And this was a big problem in the drone space. And I was really interested in the technology. And I had the opportunity to start a company with a few other experts in the field that ended up becoming the largest company of its kind in Canada. We helped the Canadian government figure out some of these drone regulations that exist today, helped write the exams. And also we ended up building the largest network of drone pilots in Canada based on the applications and training that we had. And that's right around where I met Bill in 2020. He was sort of still in these early investigative phases of building this software and, had a few different directions that they could go with it. And Bill and I met on a job for a customer, actually. And him and I just, quickly sort of fell in love as entrepreneurs and decided that, we wanted to do this together. So I ended up having that business be acquired, my last business, and then I came to join Spexi full time as the COO. So I took all of that regulatory, flying, hands-on experience and injected it into Spexi, and that's when we really started hitting the ground running on this much bigger vision, which was to cover the entire, replace the entire imagery layer with standardized drone imagery. How would you do that? What would be the methodology to do it from an operating perspective, from a pilot behavior perspective, which then translates into product and software? And then we started thinking about incentivization, how to scale this efficiently. What are some things we could look at that were successful in the marketplace that we could copy things from and take learnings from? And that's when we ran into helium. And this was in late 2020. And one of the guys on our team actually brought it to me and was like, this is a crazy network. Look at this. And I was just like, wow, that's crypto. That's really interesting. And then for me, it went, what if you could have the drone be the crypto miner and the pilots were the nodes and they could move around and image these places. And I just started, so I actually wrote the very first Spexi white paper. It was like 2 pages long and it was like, it laid it out. And I brought that to Bill at the time and I was nervous because, I had just sold my company and come on, and I was just like trying to make sense of it. And I thought he was going to think I was nuts. And immediately he was like, yes, that is such a fascinating way to do this. It might be the only way to do this at true scale. And so then we took it to a few investors in Vancouver that we knew, and they introduced us to Dapper Labs. Dapper Labs said, we love it, we'll invest, we'll take you to our investors. And that's how we met Blockchange, our lead, and the rest is history. So, we've been building, against this big Web3, Web2 drone incentivized with Crypto Vision since then. And here we are now, still building. We haven't launched a token yet. It's coming soon with the LayerDrone Foundation and the LayerDrone network that integrates with Spexi's applications. But we've taken our time, really trying to build out the supply and the demand side, striving for product market fit before there's a token, paying the contributors in cash, and they earn points, but really trying to get to the essence of product market fit before there's a token. And I think that's somewhat unique in this space. I think a lot of projects move quite quickly to launch a token, and it's something that we've really tried not to do. And I think we've done a good job there. So yeah, that's how it started, where it's at, and where it's going.
Yeah, no, that's amazing stories. Thanks for enlightening us with the beginning of Spexi. And I agree with you. I think from all the founders that I talk about DePIN, there's more and more concerns actually about bringing revenue, figure out your demand side, because that's something that I think until I feel like a couple of years ago, people were like, don't talk about revenue, don't talk about demand side, just build the supply, just build, especially in the Web 2 world, don't talk about profits, just talk, let's just talk about growth. And I think it's a really, really healthy thing as well on the crypto, and especially on DePINs, right? Because there's so many projects that are vaporware, that they just like you said, they go and release the token. Some people make money, most people lose a lot of money, and they just move on to something. The project didn't work, basically, right? So if you really want to try to build a business, a sustainable business, long-term thinking, you definitely need to focus a lot on the demand side, on how does the money actually going to come to the project. And I think that's something that you guys are doing, and makes me very, very excited to see that, more and more projects really focus on trying to build real world applications, where actually the crypto is just a small part, is the incentivization layer and not the whole project. And Spexi is doing an amazing job there. Can we talk about the LayerDrone network as well? Because you start like Spexigon, which is now the H3 hexagon, and then became Spexi. And then what came to the idea? Okay, let's build this next network, or the LayerDrone one.
Yeah, so I mean, it basically, one of the benefits of waiting to launch a token is that you also then get to observe the projects that have gone in front of you, and you get to learn from them. And I think that's a benefit that we don't take lightly. We don't take it for granted. I mean, there's amazing entrepreneurs in the space that are building different networks, and it's in our best interest to learn from them and to watch how things have gone. And so one of the things that we realized was that for our customers, our business, and the network itself, there needed to be separate entities to represent the Web 2 side and the Web 3 side. And so LayerDrone is the genesis of that thinking. We decided to spin out the Web 3 stack and all of the work we've done around crypto economics, modeling, thinking, data storage, mission generation, sort of the network in and of itself, the core bones of it, into a new Web 3 solely focused entity called LayerDrone. And so that's governed by a foundation and a separate director. It's a separate entity than Spexi Geospatial, which is the labs co and the founding core contributor. And so it's not that, it's like an entirely new network. It's basically taken all of the tech and the IP and the hard work that we've done, and it's building on top of that. And so we're in the process of transferring that over to LayerDrone, and it's going to steward the proliferation of fully standardized drone imaging networks moving forward. Spexi is still very much in synergy with LayerDrone. Spexi will be the the first company to monetize LayerDrone's data and likely the only one for some time. Spexi's also under contract with LayerDrone to build applications and software that interface with it so that it can enable contributors, drone pilots, to contribute data to the network. So the Spexi mobile application is powered by LayerDrone. Same with the applications we're building on the customer side to make the data more valuable for them. Those are Spexi powered by LayerDrone applications. But LayerDrone is the network that has all of the data. It owns all the imagery that's contributed to it. It is responsible for governance of the network. It's responsible for mission generation in the network. And it's also responsible for the treasury and the token economic system. And so those two things working together should be able to coexist, and not just, in functional ways, but in truly synergistic ways to add a lot of value to each other. LayerDrone will have a price for its data, and Spexi will pay that price to access its data and sell it to its customers. So all of the revenue that LayerDrone generates will be used to buy back tokens off the market. Whether those tokens will be burnt or synced back into the LayerDrone treasury to fund future expansion will be at the discretion of the foundation and based on health metrics of the network. It doesn't make sense to burn everything right away, in our opinion. It makes sense to make sure that the treasury is healthy, because you want to see the thing continue not just for 2 or 3 years, but for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, which is what we're trying to build, a really long-term network here. So most crypto networks, I think, have spun out entities after they launch tokens and go to mainnet, and for us it made much more sense to do it before. So it's a little bit different. We seem to do things a little bit different here compared to the status quo, so I guess it just made sense.
StorX Network's pioneering DePIN for cloud storage, a permissionless, censorship-resilient alternative to traditional platforms like AWS and Google Cloud. As a DePIN project, StorX turns unused global storage capacity into powerful decentralized networks where users can upload encrypted files and have them stored across independent nodes, not centralized servers. It's a Web3 native cloud infrastructure powered by the XDC network, where anyone can become a node operator, earn tokens, and contribute to building a more open internet. StorX empowers startups, enterprise developers, and privacy advocates with a resilient, scalable, and low-cost data storage, built for the decentralized future. Join the DePIN revolution, back your data with StorX. I do think it makes a lot of sense. I think actually a lot of projects that spun like a foundation afterwards is basically because they realized they should have done it earlier, and then we have to do it now, or otherwise we're going to even have some regulatory issues, right? Because depending where the project is situated, a lot of people open foundations in like Switzerland or some other place around the world. I think definitely makes things a bit easier. Also separating, right, like what's Web3, what's the B2B, like the for-profit company, etc. So does it mean that I can build my own Spexi competitor and work with a LayerDrone?
It does. That's exactly what it means. And I think it's in LayerDrone's best interest to do that. And so if you're a geospatial data company that wants to consume imagery produced on the LayerDrone network directly, there will be documentation and methodology for you to do that. Similarly on the capture side, which is I think quite unique. But like, let's say you're a gaming company or a geospatial company that wants to build your own capture technology to add data to the LayerDrone network in a way that's better suited for you, as long as you're conforming to the standards of the LayerDrone network and protocol, then you should be free to do that. It's an open and permissionless network that enables anyone to do that. I think realistically, Spexi is going to be the first and only developer doing that, but we've already had some interest of people being like, hey, like, is that possible for us to interact directly with that protocol? Because they see the vision, and so that's really cool. Like, that's, I think, the ultimate vision of DePIN in a lot of ways. Like, you want a decentralized, open, more permissionless protocol and network to enable participation that's not controlled by a central actor. And I think that's a big part of the promise of the blockchain and Web3 in and of itself. And I don't know that that's been realized other than in layer ones. Like there hasn't really been, I think a lot of Web3 dApps still more closely resemble, corporate centralized Web2 companies than this sort of ethos of Web3. And not to say that, we're trying to be the canary in the coal mine at all. That's not it. More just that I think, when you set it up this way and you do this prior to there being a token in existence and having to deal with everything that comes with the token, you can more easily, I think, enable that narrative to become a reality versus trying to figure all that stuff out after. So yeah, but if you wanted to, you could consume data directly out of LayerDrone. You could bypass Spexi. And if you had software engineers and applications that could ingest that raw imagery and make applications like we can, then you should be free to do that.
No, that's super interesting. And to be honest, when we had your event in Dubai, I'm a big nerd, and just the learning how Spexi actually work and how easy it is to someone to take picture. You don't need to be a professional pilot to do it, right? Especially because everything that you build is automated. What I've seen is that you get in the area that you want to take picture, you put your drone on the floor, you press a button, and everything's automated. Can you talk a bit about the flight to earn workflow? How does that work, and how was to build that actually?
Yeah, I mean that's a core part of the IP here, is the fact that we are building software that automates the flight of very small aircraft at unprecedented scales. It's part of the technical moat, I think, that exists in our project. It's quite hard to replicate it. So basically we have a mobile application that takes over the brain of these off-the-shelf drones and totally flies it for you. So you as the pilot are monitoring this activity for safety. You're not really flying. You can take control if you need to for safety reasons, and it returns the drone directly back to your manual control like you're used to. But for the most part, you're watching the drone execute its flight plan in the Spexagon fully autonomously. This is super important for the reason that this works. The reason that it works is because software flies the drone the same everywhere. And so if you want data that customers will buy, it needs to be dependable, it needs to be quality, and it needs to be the same so that when you sell it in Vancouver, or you sell it in New York, or you sell it in Lisbon, they are getting the same data product, which means the drone's at the same height. It means that the imagery is taken at the same angles and that the resolution of the imagery is the same. And the resolution is a function of the altitude of the aircraft. So the higher the aircraft, the lower the image resolution. The lower the aircraft, the higher the resolution. And you don't want too much variation there, because then customers will, it's a dog's breakfast of data, which is the thing that's plagued the drone industry, is that there's not been a concerted effort to standardize the data. It's just all over the place. And so you can't buy off the shelf drone data because it's different constantly. Whereas for us, we've because we automate the input, the software side on the input, that this isn't possible. So it's not simple. The software engineering behind it is pretty specialized, but it ends up producing incredible data for our customers, and which is why we do it.
That's awesome. If my friend from Vancouver wants to start becoming a pilot for Spexi, what do they need to do? Do they download an app? They need to do a KYC? How does that the process work?
So they need to go to our documentation and take a quick scan on the compatible drones and devices that are available to be flown on the network, which is basically any DJI Mini 2, Mini 3, Mini 3 Pro, or Mini 4 Pro drone, which are the most prevalent drones in the world by far. So there's millions of them already out there, but you can buy them from any electronics store. Then you need an Android device. drones, third-party drone software doesn't work on iOS devices, unfortunately, but it's just the reality in the drone space. It's more focused on Android. So I'm an iOS user, and I just have a Fly phone, an Android Fly phone, and I hotspot to it, and it worked great because then I have my normal phone free for doing what I need to do while I'm cruising around flying. Then they simply just need to download the Spexi mobile application and away they go. They'll need to set up an account. Right now we're paying in cash. So you'll need to also hook up your bank account through Stripe, so that we can automate payments directly to your bank account. And it happens every 2 weeks. The more you fly, the more you earn. Pretty simple. And that's it, really. There's no crazy installation. You don't have to modify the drone. You don't have to do anything like that. Out of the box, we automate everything and away you go. So I think it's pretty straightforward when it comes to DePINs, and also the drone industry. Like, we get feedback all the time that this is by far the simplest way to earn on a drone sort of network marketplace that they've ever experienced, because of the effort for us to standardize everything. It makes contributing incredibly simple.
Also, it's a great excuse to buy a drone, right? Like, a lot of people like, I really want a drone, but I don't want to pay I don't want to pay the price, or I don't think I'm going to be using it all the time to like justify the investment. Therefore, if you can make money, you can actually have an ROI on your drone. Why not? Then it's like kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, there's something called the dusty drone syndrome that if you've ever worked in drones, it talked about all the time, that you buy a drone, you get excited about it, you take it with you on the weekends for a few times, and you make some videos, and then you kind of run out of things to do with it, and so it sits on your shelf and collects a bit of dust. And that's one of the things that our pilots talk about all the time. They're like, I love flying drones. It's like this inner child that I get to be this pilot again, but I'm lacking purpose, like I can only make so many cool videos before, whereas with Spexi, you get this purpose, this thing that, pilots just want to fly their drones. And not only do you get some value for it, but you also get to have fun and join this really vibrant community of like-minded folks that, our Discord's almost at 10,000 now, and it's just growing like crazy. It's almost doubled in size in the last few months. And it's I think, arguably the most interesting community of drone pilots in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I really like about DePIN in general is like how many different projects in so many different areas, right? Like, for example, what you're building is extremely like unique. And then there's other projects doing completely different things. I remember in Dubai, you mentioned there was like, okay, how we put like a bounty for a location that needed to take the pictures. And that was like in a few hours, we have the data there. How quick have you been able to access some drone data?
Yeah, that's like been a big thesis of ours, is that once the network's up and running in areas, so pilots have onboarded, they've done some flying, and there's been some larger scale capture going on, that then when customers come in and say, hey, like I need these areas flown tomorrow or the next day or more frequently or once a week for the next 2 months, and they can just bounty specific spexigons, which would cover their area of interest that they need, whether it's one house or a bunch or whatever it might be. And so far, we've been able to test that in the real world quite a few times with customers. They've come to us and said, hey, these are the areas I need flown. How quickly can you do it? And we were like, well, we actually don't know, but let's find out. And in some cases, like in LA, just 2 weeks ago, a customer came to us and needed, I think it was 20 spexigons flown in different parts of the city. And by the time we turned those spexigons on in the network, so they came up for capture glowing gold with the reward published, and then we made an announcement to the community. Within minutes, some of those spexigons were reserved, and so pilots have the ability to reserve spexigons on the network if they have enough reputation. And some of them were being flown within literally an hour. People had navigated their way to those spexigons and had started flying. And you can see them change color based on the status of where they are in their flight cycle on the Explorer. And it was like, oh my God, like truly within hours, the customers can have their data, because we've also built the data pipeline so that the pilots fly the spexigon. The imagery is then on their SD card. They upload their imagery to the network. And then within 15 minutes of that happening, the data gets processed through the pipeline and shows up in the customer's portal. Processed, enable for them to start making analysis, which is unheard of in this space. Like that's the other piece of when you use a decentralized model like this and you build it in a way that enables data to come in more in a tasking basis instead of in massive quantities all at the same time. Customers are just like that's crazy. Like not only is this way better imagery than we're used to in terms of resolution, it's coming in, in some cases 200 times faster than what we've seen, and they can purchase it all the way down to the Spexi level, which is 25 acres, right? In traditional industries that image the Earth, like in satellites and planes, you have to buy a minimum amount of area, and it's much larger than that for higher cost. So we're just able to hit customers with these, 3 areas of value that enables them to just go, wow, like this is something we're really interested in. So, and we've been able to replicate that across a few different geographies in Canada and the US and in other parts where within hours pilots are able to get Spexigons once they're lit up.
Yeah, because if you only think about the plane, right, just the cost alone of running the plane and gas, it's going to make things so much more expensive. And then the way that you're like tackling this problem, it can really have like super localized imagery and in a cheap way and fast. That's perfect. I don't think there's anything better you can do in this sense, but I'm sure you're going to have a lot of challenges.
We've had some folks, from those plane companies come over to work for us because they're like, ooh, that's going to eat our business. I'm interested. Right. And that's when, you're really like, you're moving and shaking when you're able to disrupt the status quo industry to bring on really smart people. And it's that innovative capture model that is just totally putting us into this new echelon of customers and our ability to sell that data.
No, that's super interesting. What about the early demand? Where is it coming from? It's like a disaster response. You seem like you used to like pilot like the chopper, smart city planning, AI modeling training. Like, what is the biggest use case that you've seen so far?
Well, all of those use cases you just mentioned, we've generated contracts for them. I think you mentioned it off the top of the call, like the demand side is the hardest side. And rightfully so. It's much harder to get people to give you money than it is to give people money to do things, the demand versus the supply. I think in our network, like the supply side is also very difficult because of the sort of the problem we're tackling with automated drones at scale. So we've really had to, part of why we've taken time and not, rush to launch tokens, because we just simply weren't ready technically, the business wise, like there's just so many things to figure out. But now that we're there and the supply side is certainly humming along, and we've proven that you can do this at significant scales across some of the hardest places in the world, like the US, that customers are like, wow, this does work. People aren't coming at you with pitchforks because drones are all blocking out the sun, right? Like this fear that, everyone's going to be freaked out just simply isn't true. Also because we use really small drones that are light and not very risky. Customers have come from the municipalities, so the cities themselves that we're flying in, they all pay for data already, and they are very interested in better data at reasonable costs that also reinvest money back into the community, because it's the local community that's flying the drones to produce the data. So they'd prefer to pay us instead of these centralized, satellite or fixed wing companies that the money doesn't come back to the community. It goes to them in whatever place their headquarters is. And so that's a really interesting value prospect for us at this network. Governments, the federal government of Canada has issued several contracts to us for different use cases, all the way from wildfire prevention and response to tracking rail deficiencies and things like that using this data. We've had contracts with some of the largest geospatial gaming and AI companies that are more in proof of concept phase, because they've never had access to such high quality aerial data before. So they're just like wrapping their heads around how this can augment their products. And so far, we're still in all of those trials, and they're getting bigger and bigger in terms of contract value, and scope, which is really exciting. I think the most exciting, insurance is another one. Insurance companies are constantly trying to figure out how to better insure their assets at scale over the earth, and they're very interested in events that disasters. So whether it be hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, fires, they're always trying to get better data on how to assess those risks, and better imagery is just a better way to do it for them. But I think the most exciting use case is the next generation of spatial AI. And so AI that doesn't think semantically, but can think in physical space, that can actually close its eyes and imagine itself moving through the world and be able to direct the things that are connected to it to do the same. That is something that has not yet existed. There's some big companies that have announced massive initiatives towards that. They're, some of them are called large geospatial models instead of LLMs, LGMs. And we are squarely at the foundation level of that vision to be able to produce a standardized internet level data type that basically enables training for this physically spatial thinking AI. We hear a lot about physical AI and spatial AI and and there's lots of different sensors trying to produce data for that, but it truly is coming. Some of the biggest companies in the world are working on it, investing a lot into it, and we think that a new type of data is required for that to be a reality, and that's what we produce, a net new aerial data set that has not existed before on Earth.
Yeah, so I think that's important to say, right? You guys still early. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of work to be done into advancing the technology. First, of course, just getting what we have right now. We already have the demand side, growing that demand, and then actually tackling new, edge AI and all these extra exciting things. A lot of things that we even don't know. I personally believe that augmented reality, for example, is going to be something that's going to become more and more common in our daily lives. And, Spexi can take a very important role as well, like try to rebuild the world in a way, because you can have the drone and like filming and taking a lot of pictures in different angles, that you can kind of build a 3D version of the world as well.
Google Earth on steroids is kind of, one of the ways to think about it. And if you look at Google Earth, it's pretty good already, but like there's this next level of detail that we can get to that's just mind blowing when you think about the status quo. And so that's part of what's going on here.
It's super exciting. Last question. How can people know about Spexi, about LayerDrone, get involved, get excited? Because I'm super excited. I wish there was things I could do here in Lisbon. I'm going to actually always be following if there's an next hex here, so I can, get an excuse to buy a drone and make sure they don't get full of dust on it. Where can people learn more about the project?
Yeah, the other thing is you got to be quick. Like we just launched some cities last week, and they're now being imaged in days, which is just mind blowing. Like I fully covered. Like it's just crazy how fast these pilots can image these cities now. Like blows my mind. So two ways. So Spexi.com is the place that, is the data storefront. It's being updated as we speak, and it's going to be a lot more detailed on how the data is being integrated with customers, what the value propositions are, and how you download the mobile applications as a contributor. So Spexi.com/pilots is where you can download our applications, but at Spexi.com there's links all over to download. You can also join the Discord there. And LayerDrone, LayerDrone.org, LayerDrone.com, LayerDrone.ai, all of those domains will point to LayerDrone.org. That is the home of the LayerDrone network. A lot more content being built out there as well to give contributors a much better view of how to get involved. Right now it's pointing a lot to Spexi because that's where all of the main applications are. But both of those places, you can join the Discord, join the community. The community is an awesome place to really get a lot of resources. It's really vibrant, and there's a lot of real contributors there that are like really care about the product, the network, and are not just there to GM and win token. Like there's a lot of really like good quality conversation going on there. So would recommend that you go there. And then on X, at at Spexi Geospatial, and at LayerDrone on X is also, you know, where a lot of the conversation happens.
Thanks so much for joining the podcast. I think it was super interesting to learn more about Spexi, talk to you one more time after all those times that we did in Dubai. And actually, I'm very excited to follow the project and get you again in the podcast maybe next year to follow the progress, everything that happened, because I'm sure there's going to be another episode with a lot of cool updates as well. So for you listening, you can also go to depinhub.io/project/Spexi. They have all the links that he mentioned there as well, so, along with the description around the project. Thanks so much. I hope to see you around the world, flying some drones or just in some conference, trying to get more people excited about DePIN in general. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having us.